MarzGurl.
And I'm JoshKnightTheFirst.
And welcome to episode 13 of MokkoriPlay, the only podcast dedicated solely to all things City Hunter.
On today's podcast, we're going to cover episode 13 of City Hunter, titled My Foe's a Beautiful Lady, the Biggest Woman Trap in History.
We kind of need to address the word trap here in this title.
So last episode, I was kind of making a point about talking about the translation accuracy of an episode title. I think it's more prevalent this week.
Well, I don't know about accuracy, but I do think there was a smarter choice, a smarter decision for the sake of how we use English vernacular, because this episode features a trans person who unfortunately is presented as the villain of the episode. That's already bad enough, but the problem here is the use of the word trap in the title of the episode, and I don't think that the localization team meant anything by the word trap. Like, I think they meant a bigger picture of what a trap is, not that they were trying to call a trans person a trap, which is a really problematic thing that has been going around for quite some time.
Grammatically speaking, based off the Japanese words that are used, a more accurate translation for the title, at least for the second half, might be History's Biggest Women Hell, or Woman Hell.
Right, exactly. So I think just in this scenario, if you've just been part of internet culture for any period of time, maybe within even the last 15 years, you see the usage of the word trap go up exponentially to describe transgender people, and maybe we don't really do that. And I don't think that that's censorship, because I also don't think that that's necessarily what they were trying to say when they were writing this title.
No, of course. When you look at it contextually for the time, whether you're looking at it from the late 80s when the episode was created, or earlier within the last decade or so when this was translated by Media Blasters, correct?
No, this was translated by ADV first. And mind you, I'm pretty sure that this translation has since been cleaned up by Discotech.
Okay, that having been said, I think that over time, like a lot of things, language changes, use of certain words changes, and now we're a new team working on this translation of this episode title. I don't think if I had been on that team, I would have used that phrasing at all, given the connotation in the current climate.
Right, exactly. So again, I don't think they meant it the way that it can come across, because I'll be honest, I didn't even think about it until I was going over City Hunter with some other friends on a different podcast in the recent past, and we got to this episode, and they pointed out the word trap, and I was like, oh, that's...
It's just things
I understand. I understand why you...
For somebody who's not really thinking about it, it's real easy to pass, but when you're aware of the connotation, it's kind of glaringly obvious why you shouldn't use that.
Right, exactly.
But that having been said, this episode is pretty fun for the most part. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of comedy, a lot of things that we do see can be made a little mean. We do see a little of the meanness in the episode go towards Kaori, unfortunately.
They're a little mean towards Kaori, and then it doesn't get especially problematic until the back half of the episode.
Yes.
So we'll address that as we get to it.
Once we get to the third act. But to start off our episode, we see, again, we're back at the bulletin board there in Shinjuku. Ryo is checking the board this time, since apparently Kaori has taken it upon herself to make sure that City Hunter does not have any female clients as of late. However, Sayako apparently has made her own posting there on the bulletin board, and Ryo has rushed to see what it is.
Sayako being, of course, we've met her once before at this point, the female police officer from the Tokyo PD?
Tokyo Metropolitan Police
Or is
Force.
it Shinjuku PD?
Tokyo.
It's Tokyo, okay. Kaori has seen Ryo is there at the board, and he freaks out when Kaori has snuck up on her. His reaction is over the top and hilarious, and he runs away. And he's tried to erase her name off of the board, but it didn't really work, so Kaori knows, oh, he's gonna go see Sayako, and she's already... That has primed her the entire episode to just be mad at him.
Now, I'm gonna come back to this because there's a question that Ryo brings up later that Sayako will answer, but I have my own feelings about that when we get there.
Right.
So once we get to Saiko's apartment, she is very much only decked out in a very revealing nightie, telling Ryo, look, there's another case of human trafficking going on here in the area. A lot of beautiful women are being taken yet again. I need you to be a bodyguard and I need you to help me out on this. Mind you, while she's making the request, she has iron bars that she's got Ryo behind to make sure that he doesn't make an advance toward her.
Right, because this apparently is a problem. This is not the first time this has come up with her, so she really needs to keep him at a distance.
Literally. Now, thankfully, at least for Ryo's part, he denies the request when she's saying, oh, but I was gonna pay you back for all the times I owe you. And he's like, oh no, I'm not falling for that again. And leaves. Or so it seems, but somehow he magicked his way into Saiko's bathroom?
He's already prepped the bath, and he's like, hi, come on in.
Which of course prompts Saiko to start blasting.
Does she shoot at him?
Yes, you see a pulled out shot of the apartment building and you hear the gunshots going off and see the flashes through the window.
That's true, although the next morning, when Ryo comes home, he's got a black eye, so you figure she's done a lot more than just shoot at him. She's hit him in the face with
and roughed
something.
him up.
Yeah, she's definitely roughed him up, but he didn't go home that night, even after she shot at him. He didn't actually go home.
Well, she might have detained him just to make sure he didn't have any energy or something like that, which does happen in some episodes, depending on who does it.
But we never find out exactly. But that having been said, they do address, oh, you never actually went home last night. And Kaori's pissed, where were you? Were you with Saiko? And he's like, nah, I was out with the boys, and then I got drunk, and then I got hit in the face.
Yeah, that's the ticket. That's what happened. Mind you, she got him in the head with a potted plant first.
Well, no,
I think he's coming in the door.
I think it missed him. He stepped just one step a little too far for the potted plant to hit him. No,
you're right.
Yeah, it lands right behind his feet. And he's just like, oh my god, she almost hit me with this potted plant on the way in the door.
So let's talk about that for a second. At this point in the show, Kaori's relationship with Ryo has developed to a point where she's constantly jealous of any woman who's around him, but they don't have that kind of relationship.
Well, is it jealousy, or is it that she's concerned that, oh, I know what type of a horn dog Ryo is, and I'm just mad if he's around women at all because I'm scared that he's gonna try stuff with anybody. Is it a mix of the two? A mix of concern for these other women, and also she's jealous that he's going after these other women?
It's definitely a mix, because like we were talking about within the last episode or two, there are cases here and there where it does seem that it would be a mutual agreement, hey, consent is here, let's go ahead and do this, Ryo and other woman, but Kaori's not having that.
That happens this episode even.
And weirdly enough, we don't address Kaori's jealousy. If it's totally protection, 100% get it. But a lot of the time, it seems to be played as jealousy.
It could be seen that way. I think it's a bit early, and at a certain point, they will address Kaori. Why are you acting so jealous of these women all the time?
We're not there yet, but right now, at the very least, given the case for the episode, I can understand it coming across as protection.
Yeah.
Yes. So once that's gotten out of the way, we see that we actually have to get down to the case. So Saiko is...
Well, before we get there, I think it's important because it ties to the end of the episode. Kaori has found a string of bras just coming out of Ryo's pocket.
Oh, right,
and
exactly.
So that's why she's convinced, oh, you were over at Saiko's last night.
And Ryo says, damn it, I just kind of grabbed these out of habit. I didn't mean anything by it. He has a problem. He's a klepto for lingerie.
Yeah.
Mind you, he was doing that with Kaori's undergarments before he even met her.
Mm-hmm.
So, dude, you got a problem, seek therapy. But we have to actually get to the case where it will involve, again, human trafficking of women. Apparently, this jazzercise studio somewhere there in Shinjuku is the place where all these women are disappearing. So Saiko is posing as somebody who needs to take a jazzercise class.
She doesn't need to. She looks like she could lead the class.
I mean, for real.
She could teach some jazzercise.
And look out, here comes Ryomon. Not a Ryomon, Ryo as Spider-Man. Almost like a spider or cockroach climbing all over the window to get a peep.
I think they even call him a cockroach because definitely the manner in which he's turning and spinning and his legs are his knees are kind of kicked up. He's definitely giving the appearance of a cockroach. They're giving noises that mimic the scurrying of a cockroach.
But at the same time, since we've seen a lot of Japanese Spider-Man, it reminds me of all the ways they tried to show how wall crawling worked in that show in the 70s.
That's
and it
true.
looks very similar to me.
It is very similar. It's funny, he's looking in the window of this jazzercise class, and you see two women in the class wearing t-shirts that are references to American horror films?
Yeah, so you see one woman clearly wearing a shirt that says Reanimator, and it's got the little syringe on there, like, whoa. I didn't think you guys were going to go for that, adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft story. But then you see a woman with Chud, C-H-U-D, on her shirt, which is another kind of cult horror movie from the 80s.
Right, and people have pulled from that film and started using its title as slang in recent years.
And it's like, that is an amazing pull, even for the time.
For the time, and Japan? You guys were watching Chud? I mean, I guess... Okay, cool, but, like, even I hadn't seen Chud. I hadn't heard of Chud until I was an adult.
Mind you, if I'm not mistaken, I do believe it's free to watch on Tubi right now, so
cool,
if you want to go check that out.
We should definitely do that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, some of these older horror movies are pretty dated.
Yeah.
And that's definitely one of them.
But Sunrise just keeps doing stuff like this. This isn't gonna be the only time that this pops up.
Yeah, clearly these guys were lovers of American culture and cinema and TV and tropes and things like that.
Right.
So after we've gotten Rio down from the window, we have to go ahead and see where exactly the abductions are going to take place. So a lot of this is going to feel a lot like episode 4 when Kaori was introduced, because we're dealing with another crime syndicate who is trying to kidnap beautiful women behind a trap door. Before it was in the floor, now it's behind a wall. They're using knockout gas there in the locker room to take women. So unfortunately, there's a mix-up where Kaori tries looking for Rio, ends up coming into the women's changing room, which would make sense. Unfortunately, here again, everybody mistakes her for a man.
Which that does not make sense to me, because up until this point, I always felt like, oh, Rio's just ribbing her, right? Like, clearly she's a cute young woman, but he has to distance himself from her a little bit. So he keeps joking around like, haha, you got this boyish haircut, you just look like a boy, haha. And then this episode decides to, like, go all in, and all the women in the changing room are like, oh no, there's a man in the changing room. What are you talking about? She just has boy cut hair. What is wrong with you? She's adorable.
Exactly. So then Rio and Saiko come running to see what the commotion is about. Somehow someone threw their wig at Kaori, so now she's wearing someone else's wig and fakes them out. Oh, there's those peeping toms that way. But Saiko catches, was that Kaori in a wig? What's up with that? And then Kaori just happens to end up, this is the weird part for me, in the male locker room.
Which is where they were trying to tell Sayako to go to change, because they were like, oh, no, miss, there's a problem with the changing room. Why don't you change over in this room instead? They were trying to get her to go there initially, and she didn't do it, but Kaori ended up there, and then she got hit with the knockout gas.
And Kaori's like, hey, what's this nozzle? Does this smell like knockout gas? And then the two guys from behind the wall are like, ha, I got another one. Now, thankfully, it doesn't take Sayako and Rio very long to find the room, find the jacket, find the locker that had the nozzle hidden in it, to track down the guys and rescue Kaori. Now, it's at this point that I really want to make a point of bringing up here that Rio stops Sayako in her tracks, like, hey, hold on a second. Can we drop the pretense here? Did you do all this specifically to make Kaori bait for these kidnappers? And then he gets a big old slap in the face from Sayako, and we get a little bit of backstory here between the two of them.
Unfortunately, this is backstory that we don't really see come up again, I don't think. But it's good that it's here. It's just really easy to forget amidst everything else. That apparently Makimura, Kaori's brother, who of course we lost back several episodes ago.
In episode 5.
Back in episode 5. He used to be on the police force until there was a mistake made, and he took the blame for that mistake, and he quit the force.
That mistake, of course, being a female officer was murdered working on this exact case, trying to bust this human trafficking ring, and he was working on that case with Sayako.
And for that reason, she says, well, I would never put Makimura's little sister in danger. I cared too much about Makimura and his family.
And at that point, we see Rio actually kind of starting to dote on the knocked out Kaori there in front of him. Well, yeah, I want to protect his precious sister too.
And even Sayako's like, oh, I've never seen you get, like, really heated like that before over somebody.
So, two things to talk about here. One, Ryo very much right now showing the protective streak that he has developed for Kaori very hard.
Yeah, this might be the first time it really comes up. You really see, like, he looks over her. She's still passed out on this table. And he's looking over her, like, the look on his face says, don't worry, everything's gonna be alright. I'm gonna take care of this. And you're just like, oh, there's some character development that just happened here.
And it's very blatant, and Saiko's reading that off his face. That having been said, I actually disagree. I believe that Saiko did, in fact, do that to make Kaori bait.
I mean, I'm gonna choose to listen to the text of what is written
just
on
based
screen.
off other episodes that we've gotten with Sayako, she's more than willing to orchestrate things in such a way to make sure certain things happen.
I think that definitely is the case at a certain point in time in City Hunter as you continue to watch, but I don't think that had developed nearly that hard yet. Like, I think it takes a long time, like, before a certain point, like, I think the third season maybe. Third season, she becomes fairly insufferable for that reason. Like, she's always throwing people in to do the job of the police without telling them, hey, I threw you in here to do the job of the police, and then we just came in to sweep up and clean house and arrest people and take them to jail.
Admittedly, this episode, she is doing a lot of the legwork. Like, right here in a second, she will get on the truck with the cartel posing as somebody who has, in fact, been kidnapped to be sold off, we assume, somewhere down the line.
Right. Later on, she does a whole lot less of that kind of work and just lets other people do it. And it does become really, I'm not into this anymore. But right now, I do not believe that to be the case this early on in City Hunter.
So you believe her when she says she wasn't trying to put Kaori in danger?
At this point in time, yes.
Okay. But now, see, here's the thing I don't get, because they say, oh, we're trying to make sure Kaori is okay, so they left Kaori with the two guys that they knocked out who were trying to kidnap her, and left Kaori with a gun to interrogate them and then follow them?
Ryo knows exactly what he did, because you see in a little bit, he goes, oh, I'm sure she's handling it, and it's true, because she eventually wakes up, and she's got them really freaked out, because she's firing her gun.
Wildly, like she did last episode.
Exactly, because she can't actually hit anybody, but it's terrifying because this woman who doesn't know how to fire a gun is just blasting bullets everywhere around this room. And so Ryo is confident, like, nah, she's fine.
Like
she's got him scared. She's fine.
She's that meme from It's Always Sunny. Like, so I started blasting.
Yeah.
Like, that's Kaori this whole episode. She just came in blasting.
Yes.
But in the meantime, Saiko and Ryo have made their way to a mansion out in the woods on a hill. It kind of looks like the mansion from The Sound of Music, but don't let that throw you. It's just, big old mansion behind a gate.
But this is where all of these women have been human trafficked to.
Like, this is the holding spot before they get sent off wherever they're being sent.
Right.
So Saiko is put away with the other prisoners who are waiting to be trafficked. Ryo takes it upon himself to look around the mansion and find out, well, who's in charge here? Who do I need to take out? And we are introduced to the kingpin of this operation, who happens to be a woman only ever referred to as Boss.
Yeah, I do not believe we ever heard her name. They just kept calling her Boss this, Boss that.
So as such, we will refer to her as Boss. So this woman is the one in charge of the trafficking. She's running things. Ryo's about to get the drop on her, but unfortunately, that's the moment that Kaori finally caught up. It's like, okay, I'm here. I'm gonna help. Hey, somebody's trying to sneak in. Let me hit him with a rock. She threw a rock at him. It was a little rock.
Hits Ryo in the back of the head and knocks him clean through the window that he's trying to spy on.
Totally blowing his cover. And woman's like, oh, he's hot. And Ryo's like, oh, she's hot. Which doesn't always happen on this show.
No, it does not.
And Ryo and this woman clearly have an attraction to each other. Boss tells her lackeys, hey, get out of here. I'm going to interrogate him by himself. And then they kind of just start flirting.
Yeah, and then Boss shows Ryo around the premises and even shows him like, hey, here's all the ladies we've captured.
Including your girlfriend, referring to Sayako.
To Sayako, and Ryo's like, yeah, well, I guess you can keep Sayako, cause now I found you and you're hot.
And she's like, oh, I'm so flattered. Come with me. And, like, they're moving real fast, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's been a minute for both of them. Both of these characters are horny on main right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so they head up to Boss's room. Mind you, Kaori, in all of this distraction, managed to find her way into that room and is currently hiding in the closet with a gun.
Mind you, Kaori, I'm not sure she is aware that what Ryo is trying to do right now is bust a human trafficking ring. The entire time she's been chasing him because she was convinced that he hooked up with Sayako the night before. Well, that's the reason why she's there.
See, the thing of it though is she does know that because she just interrogated those two guys at gunpoint. So she's aware of this, but she's totally caught up in busting Ryo like she's the older sister from Phineas and Ferb. Like, why are you doing this right now? There are bigger fish to fry.
So Ryo and Boss have turned out the lights in the bedroom, and they're really like just moments away from scoring. Okay.
Now, mind you, I don't want to miss this just yet. While they're flirting with each other, Ryo asks the boss, well, why is it that you're kidnapping these women? And the boss tells him, women think anything less beautiful than them is scum. That is a trait I can't tolerate. That's why I kidnapped these women.
Yeah, so we've heard Boss's motivation. This is going to be important in a second. The motivation, again, is that she's not just jealous of these beautiful women, but she feels like beautiful women mistreat any other women that they believe
aren't as beautiful, and they are ostracized for it.
Right.
So at this moment when Boss and Ryo are about to score, Kaori starts blasting again. She knocks over a little like panda statue, which hits Boss in the head. She gets out of bed, the covers drop, and we find out that Boss is the trans character in the episode.
Yes, exactly. This is where a bunch of unfortunate shit happens, okay? This is unfortunately where the episode is problematic. One, that we now know that a trans character is the bad guy, which is already like a negative trope against trans people in fiction, is creating especially trans women to be a bad guy, to be murderers, etc. You know, that's already kind of a problem.
But on top of that, the trans panic that's displayed by Ryo once he sees what the case is and starts like yelling at the top of his lungs, I don't want to be here anymore, oh no.
The trans panic is kind of bad, I'm not gonna lie. That was really unfortunate. Kaori and Sayako don't react nearly as badly. They are shocked. They're surprised because in their eyes, this person, quote unquote, passed. That's already also kind of a problematic idea as well, is does this person, quote unquote, pass or not? It's interesting they even gave this character a very feminine voice. They did not try to play the character up for comedy, which is a point in its favor, actually. They didn't try to make them some sort of a cartoon or try to make them really unattractive, like, haha, you're an obvious dude in a dress, like a lot of stuff at the time tries to do.
This is true.
So in that sense, it's really pushing a line.
Yes, very hard, and now viewing it, this part's not cool. Now, thankfully, Sayako tries to get Ryo past it pretty quick by reminding him, hey, there's a bunch of other women downstairs who need your help.
Oh, by the way, Sayako's out.
Right, Sayako managed to try to pull the I hurt my leg move that we saw her do in her intro episode. That doesn't work, so she just kicks the guy in the balls and got out. So good for her.
Anyway, she's free. And she lets all the other women go as well, right?
But there's still all the grunts roaming around the compound, so she needs Ryo to go ahead and distract them and deal with them.
And Ryo immediately jumps out a window to go after and save all of these other women.
Now, I do appreciate at that moment, Sayako presents it to Ryo, hey, remember there's a reason we're here, go save the people that are captured, which is admittedly a very good point. Unfortunately, they don't try to detain Boss, because that's still the head of the human trafficking ring.
Yeah.
Which gives her time to go get a whip and come after them.
And she's pretty good with that whip. Like, Sayako is pulling out her throwing knives, which I noted.
They're monogrammed.
They're monogrammed with a little letter S on each knife to indicate they belong to Sayako.
Yes.
She whips all of the knives out of the air.
She takes out Kaori's handgun.
So she's real good with it, and it's in this moment where she's like, well, I can't stand that I have to kill these beautiful women because they treated me so badly. And
she says specifically that she won't let women who have ridiculed her whole life, especially beautiful women, get away.
Which I understand, kind of, where this character is coming from, because surely this is something that a lot of people could identify with, that they feel like they did not fit in when they were growing up, or maybe even as an adult. They feel like they don't fit in, and people do not understand them, and they just look at them, and they look down on them, and they belittle them. I feel like that must be a narrative that a lot of these people go through, and yet you know what they don't do? Kidnap people and then attempt to murder them. That's where the problem lies.
Now, that being said, we're not cool with them, obviously, human trafficking people, because that's awful in and of itself, but the motivation is real as far as being ostracized to the point that you want to lash out. I get how somebody would want to express that anger. I get that.
For that reason, I feel like if that was the story they wanted to tell, I bet you they could have done a really good story with that narrative of this character, right? And unfortunately, they did not do that. They made her a human trafficker who was also considering just straight up murdering these women. That was pretty bad.
That is bad. Thankfully, Ryo shows up having already dealt with the grunts, has her drop the weapon, and the episode kind of ends there. The women who have been kidnapped are there thanking Ryo, and Kaori takes this moment to pull out the bra she's been holding literally all episode.
Like for the last almost half an hour of TV time.
Pulls up Saiko's shirt, puts the bra on, and is like, oh yeah, that's totally your bra. Ryo, what are you doing with this bra? And then chases him as we hear Get Wild come into play.
So, again, let me reiterate, Kaori was much less concerned about the human trafficking and much more concerned about Ryo did not come home last night. I think he stayed over at Saiko's place. That was her entire concern this whole time.
And the thing about it is, unfortunately, that's where the episode ends. I do kind of wish there had been a bit of an epilogue to address Boss, give her the dignity of a character name. And actually deal with the motivation here, because I think there's a lot to be said about that, specifically because when we get into later episodes, we see that Ryo might not be as traditionally straight as he plays himself, because he kind of tries to bend the rules in certain episodes.
Sometimes he does.
As far as his own direction, as far as sexuality goes.
Right, exactly. And mind you, that does not always prevent a person, even in real life, from acting out on their own panic and not understanding who they are.
Because unfortunately, some people, maybe when they're trying to develop their understanding of gender representation, they don't know how to deal with it, so they'll label things incorrectly because they're trying to figure things out for themselves.
Well, not just label things incorrectly, but also react really poorly.
Yes,
even if
yes.
I've heard a lot of narratives from people who have thought that they were totally straight, and then it turned out later on in life they realized, oh, I expressed my gender differently than I understood, or it turns out, oh, I'm not actually straight. But before I found that out, I treated people who I thought were different from me kind of badly. I feel like that's what Ryo has done a number of times, and this is a little bit of headcanon, but as we were just discussing, I do feel like Ryo plays around with sexuality a little bit as time goes on.
And we'll get to those episodes that show there's a little bit of a sway to Ryo that would be okay for him to explore.
I mean, he doesn't really.
Not this episode, unfortunately. And that's where we are for that episode. Next week, we're going to be dealing with a pop star that Ryo has to protect. It's not The Bodyguard, because The Bodyguard hasn't happened yet, but it's basically the movie The Bodyguard.
Yeah, also a younger girl who he definitely tries to avoid being romantically intimate with in any way, shape, or form, and I appreciate that.
Thank God.
Thank God.
So we hope that we've done our best to address the issues that were brought up in this episode in an enlightened manner, because unfortunately at the time, the people working on this probably weren't nearly as aware of what any of this would mean to the trans community, to people viewing this episode who would feel very ostracized by the villainous portrayal here.
It is kind of unfortunate because the manga author Tsukasa Hojo actually did create another manga later that was not localized in North America, but there's another manga he created that sort of revolves around gender and family and how they relate to one another when they don't really know or understand the exploration of things. And it's not a totally perfect series, but it does seem like it addresses gender and gender identity better than what this episode did. so it's just unfortunate that we look at this piece of Hojo's history and it looks like this.
Yeah, so we could talk about this episode, but it wasn't like we weren't going to address that issue.
Right, and actually, if anybody else has any other thoughts on this particular topic, anything that we did not necessarily address just because maybe we did not know the correct verbiage in order to address some of this, perhaps, definitely hit us up on social media and let's talk about it, because I think it would be very good and very beneficial to talk about how this is represented in media.
So hopefully we can do that, but next time, pop star protection.
So yes, come back next time when we cover the 14th episode of the TV series Getting Married at Age 16, Hot Kiss with a Pop Idol.
If you want to catch us outside this podcast, you can always find us both over on Twitter. I'm at JoshKnightTheFirst.
And I'm at MarzGurl. Thank you all so much for listening to our 13th episode of MokkoriPlay. And if you don't come back next episode, I'll have Josh trampled to death by a rabid pack of idol otaku.
Wait, what?